grown out of some of her political stances when she ran for president in 2020. With us now is pollster Frank Luntz. He's joining us in our fifth seat at the table. Frank, first of all, do you agree with those 3 points from James Carville? And is that really the formula for this next debate for her?
I'm not convinced. Now, I'm going to follow what James Carville says because he's had years of success. But that said, Trump's strongest position right now is the policy differences between him and Harris. Inflation, which I call affordability. Immigration, which I talk about national security and the sense of safety and security. These are areas where Trump has the advantage. If it's about personas, if it's about character, she wins, and she'll win easily. If it's about policy, Trump has a 10-point advantage on affordability, a 10-point, 12-point advantage on immigration. So he has to go. And the problem for Trump is he has the inability to do that. He has no self-control. He can't keep his criticisms. And if I'm her, I'm trying to find one word to summarize everything that she's thinking as Trump goes after her. And that word is really?
I have a feeling that we might hear that. I mean, you know, I feel like at this table, we've been talking about exactly that over the last, 6 weeks. Basically, since Kamala Harris came into this race as the top of the ticket, Trump's inability to make the case against her is the biggest thing. And it also has allowed her to not actually...
So, there's been a lot of chatter in the media lately, pushing the idea that Trump's attacks on Kamala Harris aren't landing. You've probably seen the headlines saying things like, Trump's strategy against Harris is failing, or Kamala's untouched by Trump's criticism. They're trying to spin this narrative that Trump can't make a solid case against her. But let's take a closer look at what's really going on here. Trump has been hammering home some very specific points about Kamala Harris, calling her a radical leftist, a San Francisco liberal, and a flip-flopper. These are not just random insults. They're targeted critiques meant to highlight what many on the right see as Harris's true political colors. And contrary to what the media might be telling you, these points are resonating with a lot of people. Harris has a long history of supporting far-left policies. She's been a staunch advocate for things like Medicare for all, before she flip-flopped on it when it became politically inconvenient. And let's not forget her time as California's Attorney General, where her tough-on-crime stance suddenly softened when it came to issues like immigration enforcement. These are classic signs of someone who bends with the political winds rather than standing firm on principles. Harris is deeply rooted in one of the most liberal cities in America. This isn't just about geography. It's about a political culture that's far removed from the values of Middle America. Trump's team is smart to point this out because it underscores a key concern. Can someone who's so entrenched in the political left coast really represent the broader American electorate? The media can say what they want, but the fact is, these attacks are sticking. People are noticing the inconsistencies in Harris's record, and they're questioning whether she's really the moderate she tries to portray herself as. So, when the media tells you Trump's attacks aren't working, ask yourself, if they weren't, why would the media feel the need to keep insisting they're not? This isn't just about Trump throwing out random insults. This is about exposing a candidate who's trying to wear a moderate mask while hiding a much more radical agenda. And no matter how much the media tries to cover for her, these facts are coming to light.
Really break with Biden? In a lot of ways. She, in her interview with CNN last week, she outlined what she was running on, but she didn't break with Joe Biden. And that seemed to me to be a very clear, concerted choice on her part.
Yeah, well, why would she? I mean, until forced, right? And then even if you take Carville seriously, that she's got a break with him, you can do that implicitly as well. In other words, you don't have to say, hey, I don't even like what Biden did or what he did, I'm doing differently. You just announce your set of priorities, things that you find important, underscore them, and then take what was good from Joe Biden and extend it. And the things that you want to leave aside, you can do so. When you sit down to a meal and you don't like the whole thing, you don't just trash the whole thing. You pick and choose. And I think she's capable of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Frank, just going back to you for a second, the Post has a good headline kind of summarizing what we've been seeing a little bit in the polls. Biden is suddenly seeing his best polls in years. All of a sudden, the country is the same. Nothing has really changed since he left the race, but the voters view him more favorably now? I mean, so is it really about policy, or is it just because many of them thought that he was too old to run again?
He was absolutely too old. And it was not just the age, it was his inability to talk about the future. In the end, the number one value the public wants is a detailed plan of action. They don't want to be looking backward, they want to be looking ahead. And they question whether Biden was going to be strong enough 2 years from now, 4 years from now, let alone a year from now.
I think one of the other things that we've seen is that even in the month or so since Joe Biden has stepped down and Kamala Harris has replaced him at the top of the ticket, we've seen a level of campaigning that we just haven't seen from we just didn't see from the Biden administration. Even looking at things like the media ad buys, right? $90 million, I think, in a 3-week span, as opposed to the Biden administration Biden campaign spending almost nothing on television and media advertising and media buys across the country. The kind of really just intense campaigning that is necessary, pounding the ground, hitting these various stops, swinging through these quite literal swing states, we did not see from the Biden administration. The other thing that going into this is, remember, the narrative around Joe Biden has changed since he stepped down. So before it was he willing to put himself in front of country? And the second that he stepped down, the narrative around him changed, we saw in public opinion, to someone who was willing to do, quote unquote, the right thing for democracy and the right thing for the country. And voters are rewarding him for that.
But they're not rewarding Kamala Harris at the levels that they were excited for Joe Biden in 2020. So Kamala Harris is still polling below where Joe Biden was right after Labor Day. So she still has to pick up swing voters. She still has to pick up young voters. She still has to pick up a lot of demographics. And so what I think about this James Carville strategy of let Trump blow himself up, you know what? Trump is going to say a few things, but it's going to be noise added to the noise, and no one will learn, no one will lose. Nothing will happen from that. If Kamala Harris actually wants to grow from her 40-something% and she wants to try and solidify, then she actually has to make a case for herself. She can't just sit there and say, this guy. There has to be some reason to vote for her. I don't know whether that's separating from Biden. I don't know whether that's running away from what she has said publicly.
I think the fourth thing that Carville should have written is that Kamala should continue her strategy of avoiding unscripted interviews, because I think we know, if we're being honest, from the past several years of seeing her as vice president, that she can be a gaffe machine in unscripted moments. And her strategy over the past month has basically been to do no interviews, except for the one with CNN. And that's basically worked. I mean, the polls are showing it's worked. So when the polls are showing that your strategy is working, you keep doing what's working, which is, no unscripted moments and let Trump destroy himself.
I think she's highly intelligent. In terms of what she's learned in this phenomenal period of time. You're right in terms of the polling, even among African-American people, but we've only known her for about a month now. So if given just a little bit of time that's left for her to continue to be aggressive about going after those votes is ingenious. But I do think Brother Coleman is right in the sense that, why fix it if it ain't broke? And because it's worked to her advantage, when it comes time for the debate, we see her forensic capability. We see her prosecutorial experience coming to bear. And I think that she begins to expose the holes in Trump's thinking. Doesn't take much to do that, but it also reveals his character.
This is also, look, you can, whatever the reason is that.
Let's break down this situation, folks. We're seeing headlines and pundits claiming that Joe Biden is somehow bouncing back in the polls, and some are even suggesting that voters are rewarding him for his time in office. But hold on a minute. Are we really supposed to believe that? Let's get into the details. This isn't about Biden's miraculous political revival. This feels like part of a broader strategy. Since 2020, there's been a sense that Kamala Harris was being groomed to eventually take Biden's place, whether by design or default. Think about it. The relentless negative coverage Biden received wasn't just a reflection of his performance. It could have been a push to make him step aside, clearing the way for Harris without her having to win the nomination on her own merit. Now, this might sound like a conspiracy to some, but consider the facts. Harris was always positioned as Biden's heir apparent, and with the Democratic establishment's clear unease about Biden's viability in 2024, it's not too far-fetched to think that there's been a coordinated effort to orchestrate a smooth transition. By manipulating poll numbers, they create the illusion that Biden's decision to step down or be pushed out is his own, paving the way for Harris without the messy business of a contested primary. If you see Biden suddenly climbing in the polls, don't just take it at face value. There's more going on behind the scenes than meets the eye. The media and political establishment have a vested interest in shaping the narrative to suit their goals, and that includes setting the stage for Kamala Harris.